Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today, Chip Fridrich. We will talk Vanderbilt baseball. This episode is sponsored by the Well Coffee House, a Nashville area coffee house that provides fresh roasted coffee along with house-made pastries. Breakfast and lunch offerings. There are 5 locations to serve you in the Nashville area. Those are in Brentwood Green Hills, downtown, Bellevue, and Cool Springs Lifeway. More information can be found at wellcoffeehouse.org. The Well Coffee House, where coffee changes lives. We thank our title co-sponsor, Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center, which is located in the Gulch. Our news today, presented by Sutherland and Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If your loved one has been hurt in any type of accident, call Taylor or Russell at 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. Good guys, they are really good at what they do as well. Well, lots has happened with Vanderbilt baseball since last week. The Commodores SEC tournament champions, as well as regular season champs, Philip Clark gets Vandy the win in the SEC tournament with a 9th-inning single that breaks open a tie game. Vanderbilt was down 8 runs earlier in that contest. Also, the Commodores on Monday learned their NCAA regional pairings. The Commodores will open the Nashville Regional against Ohio State. Indiana State and McNeese State joined Ohio State in the Nashville Regional. The Commodores, the number 2 seed in the tournament overall. Again, that starts on Friday. Today's guest line brought to you by my friends at Boll & Branch, which was started by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen. I put my money where my mouth is with those guys. I've slept on their sheets for years. They're incredible. Had no idea how comfortable they were till I got them. They are fair trade certified, which means they're made under safe conditions by men and women who were treated and paid fairly. Try them for a month. There's a return guarantee. I'm wasting my breath. You're not going to need it. Ever since I got their sheets, I've not slept on anything else. If you have the sheets, try the mattress. That was voted best mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com. That is spelled B-O-L-L and Branch. Enter the promo code Vandy. Get $50 off your first set of sheets. Our question and answer session in the mailbag, sponsored by Vanderbilt fan Josh Minton, an independent insurance agent operating out of Brentwood, looking for a one-stop shop to take care of your insurance needs. Josh has you covered. Call him today, 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Twitter at Joshua Minton HQ or Facebook at facebook.com/JD Minton HQ. He's my insurance agent. Give him a try. Tell him you heard about it here. Chip Fridrich joins us. We're going to talk some Vanderbilt baseball. Chip, it was a fun week for Vanderbilt fans, winning in Hoover in 4 games, winning the last one in pretty crazy fashion, coming down 8 runs behind. Top it off, this is Christmas for college baseball fans. We get the pairings. We'll get into those. But just your thoughts on Vanderbilt's run in Hoover, and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, it was a great last couple days in Hoover. I mean, what can you say? I mean, we talked about last week on the podcast how things lined up pretty well for Vanderbilt as far as the pitching. I mean, they had the bye into Wednesday's game, and things lined up, 1, 2, 3, 4 as far as the starters. I think is one of the last things we talked about and one of the last things I mentioned. And it went pretty much par for the course, except Sunday's game did not really go as well as we thought to begin with, of course. Let's take it lightly. And but got out of it unscathed. I know a lot of TV sets probably got turned off and radios got turned off and people cut the grass and went to the pool. And little they know that the team had come back. And I think it just ultimately shows the heart of this team and how serious of a run they can make, because I'm telling you, I was one of those. I mean, I didn't turn the set off, but I know that with the thoughts that were going through my mind when the score was 9-1 was not pleasant. It wasn't positive, but all that really matters is that coaching staff and the team rallied like they did and got the victory, which is really, really tough against an Ole Miss team. It's very comfortable at Hoover. They won it last year. They had a big fan base there behind them. And it just really, really shows the heart of this team and how determined I think that they are to push through the next couple weekends and get to Omaha and then let it ride and see what happens.
I was not shocked they won that game. I watched it first pitch to last pitch, and somebody texted me, and about the game, and my response basically was, my question is, can they hold Ole Miss down with pitching? Of course, the first two guys were terrible because I think that the bats are that good where they can come back and win this thing. Now, Ole Miss did surprise me a little bit by going to Will Etheridge, and I think they had more good arms available for use than you would have thought Ole Miss would have had at that point. But my question was always like, can they hold the other guy down for a while? Because I figured the bats were good enough, and that might have been the underrated part of what we saw was what Jake Eater gave them.
Sure. I mean, you look at what after Zach King came in, and to King's credit, I mean, King came in the second game when the 1-0 victory over Mississippi State, and even though he threw an inning, it was a positive inning. He threw well. He didn't get in any trouble, and then just he couldn't really piece together anything any better than Raby did. I mean, he given up 3 runs, all of them earned in an inning and 2/3. But Eater and Brown really were the story of that ball game. Eater kind of piecing it together for 3 2/3 and allowing the bullpen to get to Tyler Brown, and Brown coming in earlier than he really ever has in the last month or so. I mean, I can't remember him coming in the seventh inning before this past weekend. So yeah, I mean, you got to tip your hat to Eater and the performance he did, just kind of keeping it together, which he obviously did, and allowing that offense, which is, I think they're averaging 8 runs a game. And so to your point, yeah, I mean, Ole Miss scores 9, it's 9-1, but you got to realize that this is one of the more potent offenses in the country. And you look at the law of averages, if they can come back and get their share of runs. So yeah, I mean, it's, Chris, it's a, I don't know what it is. It's in the water, or it's in tradition of Vanderbilt fans to get all, hot and bothered when things don't go well. And, you look at this tournament, and it's a very much of a psychological mess, this tournament, the way it works, because you get the bye, the team disposes of Auburn quickly in game 1, and it run rules them, and then has a, for the most part, a good performance against Mississippi State in the pitcher's duel, then really takes it to LSU, and then the tournament goes to single elimination after that. They did that several years ago to save arms for pitching. And, I think just the nervous Nelly kind of Vanderbilt fans that some are like, well, this is just a disaster. And, we need to get rid of, Raby needs to go. He needs to be the 4th guy, and Hickman and everybody's all settling in the Twitter universe and thinking that it's a disaster. And this team just proved him wrong. And so I think that it again shows heart and determination that they're going to be a tough out in this tournament. But yeah, I mean, there's some people you can point to, Chris. I mean, that those last 2 guys, Eater and Brown, really showed their courage and mettle there to hold it together and allow this team's offense just to, will the game as offensively and win the game.
Chip, their offense was just incredible. They get basically shut down by Ethan Small, and they still managed to score, 35 runs in, I guess, 32 innings, because they didn't bat in the 9th a time or two, and they had a 7-inning run rule game. I may have been off by an inning or two as I was doing my quick math, but that's amazing under any circumstance. But nobody was scoring runs in Hoover. They were the only ones that were really putting runs together until Ole Miss did it against Vanderbilt's first 2 pitchers. That is just incredible what the offense was able to do down there.
Oh yeah, I mean, and look at the line score for yesterday's game, which it was brought up on the radio, the TV broadcast several times. I mean, Commodores had 17 hits. They almost doubled up Ole Miss on the hit category, 17 versus 9, and a lot of those hits, of course, came late. But I mean, they were tagging the baseball. And one thing that I kind of thought was interesting on some of the broadcast questions to some of the Vanderbilt players, and I know you look at a small sample size as far as what these guys have accomplished, these seniors, guys, or, guys in the juniors of the team, Blade, that crew, is that, they kept talking about, well, Vanderbilt hadn't had a lot of success of late. And I know they'd lost 4 in a row in Hoover, but before then, and you and I know that, I mean, this has almost been the Vanderbilt Invitational. I mean, this team has gone down to Hoover and taken it very seriously. Even the years before they won the national championship, they were in the finals or in the, they either won it or they were in the finals, or they were knocking on the door several times. So I thought that was a little misleading that people, was talking about. I know we were talking about 2 years sample there, but this has been a tournament that it caters well to Tim's pitching staff, Scott Brown's staff. It's a big ballpark, lots of room, lots of foul territory. Even though this team had tons of home runs this year, it's a team that it's a park that is very conducive to what Vanderbilt does, the kids they recruit. And so I thought that bodes well. So, yeah, I mean, Ole Miss has played well recently. They won it last year, but take the last 2 years, this is something that this team, you're never going to see a Tim Corbin team take this tournament lightly. I think he even mentioned today at his press conference here in Nashville that if they're going to turn the scoreboard on and they're going to keep score, we're going to play and fight to win. And that's what they did.
Yeah, I double-checked. They scored, 34 runs in 33 innings. And I'm looking at the all-tournament team. How they only got Pat DeMarco and J.J. Bleday on there is crazy. Now, I understand it, and I've been there before. They sometimes take the votes before the ends of games. But, man, you had 5 different guys hit home runs down there. You had a lot of guys hitting the ball well. That's hard to believe. I guess before I can criticize that, I have to go back and look at the stats of everybody, and maybe the guys that got picked ahead of some of the guys that I've got in mind, like a Phil Clark, had outstanding weeks. I guess it's possible. It's just with so few runs scored down there, it's hard to believe they didn't get more than that. LSU had more people on the tournament team than they did.
Yeah, I mean, DeMarco had multiple hit games in every game except the Mississippi State game. So, I mean, there's a guy who played really, really well down there. And, I think that, there were several players who could have been on there. I mean, Steven Scott, he went 3 for 4 in the opener. Now, a lot of times when you do play well early in the tournament, you don't get rewarded down the line as much as you would. I mean, if it's in game one, then it's kind of hard to, get your reap your rewards as far as all tournament when things like that happen, because he had a whale of a game in that 11-1 win in game one on Wednesday.
What were your thoughts on Jake Eater? We knew that going down there, we wanted to see what arms did they trust, what arms could show up. Unfortunately, didn't get out of Zach King, didn't get it out of Patrick Raby. Hugh Fisher was a mixed bag, but Eater was really good. I don't think his raw stuff is as good as Fisher's is, but he's been pretty dependable lately. I have to think that's one takeaway from Hoover. The way that he pitched, I would think he'd be important going forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, Eater, I was impressed with his poise on the mound for a young kid. I thought he did well. I mean, Eater and Ethan Smith have kind of been getting those innings where, you've been early in the year Zach King was getting those slots. But when you had Eater, Eater and Smith, and I thought Smith was a little wild. That's just being an understatement. I mean, I think that his heartbeat might have been a little going too rough for him as far as his tempo. And you got guys like that. I mean, the hard throwers, when, they came in, and I think he was really trying to overthrow. And I think you kind of saw his expression on his face. The moment might have been a little too big for him. And I'm not criticizing too much, but you can just tell guys are overthrowing and trying to just, and that can be about this pitching staff. I had a discussion with some coaches recently about that. And when you got guys who throwing and just one guy after another in the 90s, mid 90s, low 90s, there's a tendency, and that's one thing about the art of pitching, that becoming a thrower versus a pitcher, guys who just throw it instead of learning how to pitch. Sometimes, throwing 95 and it's all over the place. I mean, there's a good thing of being controlled, sensing, being a little bit wild. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you're not getting the ball over the dish and you're walking guys and hitting guys in the kneecap, that's really not doing your club well, especially when you got a lead. So, it was interesting to see the guys who were trotted out there. I thought Mason Hickman did really, really well. I mean, how much better could he do? I mean, he struck out 9, walked 3 on Wednesday in a game that was easy to pitch in, of course, because anytime you get a 6-0 lead, that's kind of nice luxury to have. I thought Drake Fellows was brilliant and one of his better outings he's had the last, month or so. I thought he pitched really well. Zach King did well for his inning, and then he turns around on Sunday and followed up with a less than desirable performance. And then Tyler Brown, I mean, goodness, he goes an inning and 2/3 in game 2 against Mississippi State and really set the tempo and didn't allow them to do anything, and then comes down and throws 3 innings, which he has not done, as I mentioned, and really did well. I mean, struck out 2, gave up 2 hits, but he closed the door and allowed the Commodores to get that victory yesterday and get a win for him.
My question now is what you do with Mason Hickman and Patrick Raby. And Raby now has had 2 poor starts in his last 2. Hickman has been outstanding basically all season, super consistent. And as I've said, he plays really well in Omaha, which is where they want to go. I think he's the perfect pitcher for that park because the way you get beat in a park like that is free passes and a ball finds a hole somewhere. Well, Mason just doesn't allow a lot of base runners. Patrick, even when he's pitching well, he does. So I know that Tim Corbin is a creature of habit. I know they've had the same 3 starters the whole year. I know the all-time wins leader, blah, blah, blah. I get that. And I mean, no disrespect to Patrick, but you're in this to win. And one way that I look at things is, like, if I'm sitting in the other dugout, what do I not want to see? And what I don't want to see is Mason Hickman on the hill facing me because of what he's done all year. And he showed it in Hoover too. So my question, I know that Tim doesn't like to shuffle the cards late in the season. People have brought up the point, well, you could hold Mason in reserve and bring him in early if somebody struggles. And I understand that. And I think it's important to have that kind of guy. But here's the counterpoint to that. What if you get in one of these things where he has a rough inning and he gives up 3 runs, and then he gets into the second and he loads the bases with nobody out, and then you go there, one seeing eye single can bring in 2 or 3 runs. All of a sudden you're in a 5-6-0 hole, hypothetically speaking. If you're facing a guy on the other side, as good as their offense is, there have been 4 or 5 pitchers who've shut them down pretty well all year. It may be too late in that case. Your ship may have sailed, and I would hate to see them get Costa Regional under that circumstance. Look, I like Patrick Raby a lot. I think he's a terrific kid. He has earned everybody's respect. He's had a better career than people have thought, but even when Patrick has pitched well, he has not been a dominating, shut you down, get out of the inning on a minimum of pitches and runners kind of guy. Mason's been that all year. Is it time where you just say, we've got to quit rolling the dice on that and go with what we know? Because the way I look at it, Chip, a weekend series, it's best of 3 a lot of times, whether that's the first part of Omaha or it's a super regional. And I look at it thinking, okay, Fellows is a wild card. He's really good or great about 2/3 of the time, and then there's that other third. I think Rocker is good or solid almost all the time, and the same thing with Hickman. So I look at it and I go, if you go Fellows, Rocker, and Raby, it's like, okay, you're probably going to get 1 good start, and you might get 2 more, or you might get 1 and 2 bad ones. I think if Hickman's in there, then you're pretty sure you're going to get a couple of good starts. To me, I look at it, I just think it's a risk they can't afford to take anymore. But I understand that there are other components to baseball beyond the stats. How do you size up their pitching, and what do you do if you're Tim Corbin about your rotation going forward?
Well, Chris, that's the $1 million question, and my answer to you will be, it's what I think he'll do and what everybody thinks could be a possibility. What I think he'll do is I think he'll keep everything just like it has been. And we've heard him say I think he pitched Sonny Gray, if I'm not mistaken, one time he went out of order in a regional, and I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and check it, but he has gone the way that, you mentioned creature of habit, and we've talked about that. He has stayed that way. I would be really surprised. I wouldn't be shocked if he changed the order, but and it's funny how perception is, Chris, and I don't know if you'll follow me on this, and I told the former player this today. I think if they lose that game yesterday, I think Hickman gets the chance to start game 3, the finals of the region on Sunday. The fact that they came back, and if you noticed Tim Corbin's press conference after the game, he was very positive about Raby, that he just had a bad day and really mentioned it as, he's had a great career. He's won more games than any pitcher at Vanderbilt. Look at his stats. He's 9-1 for a reason. It just, everything seemed to point to in the post-game press conference hey, he had a bad day. People have bad days. Look what the offense did that picked him up. I think had they lost the game, had the final score been 9-3, if it had been 9-1 even or worse than that, I think the perception would have been, look, we might need to make a change and flip those two guys. It's just a hunch I have based on the past and the history. And Tim is pretty easy to gauge as far as history. I mean, he's not a guy who changes and alters his when he gets something said. I think he's always said he's worried about what the perception is, the message it sends to his team that he's not confident in a certain guy. If he starts making a bunch of changes, especially in the pitching staff, would I be shocked? No. And I think that Raby is the type of kid and a competitor and a senior and a mature kid, from what I gather and what I've heard, that he would accept it. So I don't think it would be a thing that would rock the team as far as what it would be reception. So, there's some people say, well, why not start Hickman on Friday? Yeah. I mean, to me, that would be the ultimate no. I just think that's the thing that would send the message. But if you do it on game 3, yes, it would surprise me. It wouldn't shock me, though. I think we're talking it's a 70-30% chance, 70 being that it's still going to be Raby, but that 30% chance, it's amazing perception is if they lose that game yesterday, I think it would have been 50-50 or maybe even Hickman getting the nod. I hope you're following me there, but that's just kind of what I was thinking when the game was over, what I thought was going to happen for this rotation.
No, I'm completely following you with that, and I think you make a great point. I think when teams are winning, people tend to gloss over the stuff that's gone wrong. I think when people are losing, people have a hard time looking and seeing a good baseball team in there. And often it's the underlying facts and how you put those together that says where your future's going. I totally agree with that. I think that the way yesterday would have been perceived would have potentially been a lot different. When you win a game like that to win an SEC championship and you come from 8 runs down, I just think that the shot of adrenaline and endorphins or whatever you get from that kind of overrides all the negative, and I think it's something that you got to be careful as a coach to navigate through.
Yeah, and if you remember, and going back to 2014, now I think when you get to Omaha, I think all bets are off. If you get to Omaha or in a super situation for super, but if you think back, if your memory serves you, to 2014, Tyler Beatty was struggling at the end of the year. I mean, he got lost, if you recall, late, and he did not. The rotation definitely switched. And I don't know if it switched for the supers after the regional, but Beatty had a pretty bad last couple weeks of the season and was not really a factor in Omaha. He pitched some, but he was not he definitely did pitch in Omaha, but there was a definite change as far as how that rotation with that staff the year that they won it. So it could be changed. I think it's, Corbin's always, positions are rented, they're not owned. And I think Raby's that they've got too much mojo going for them, feel good as far as guys getting along. They look like they care for one another. And I think any decision that was made, I think probably Raby would understand. I mean, if I'm Raby, I'm sitting there, hey, I didn't deserve to stay in the game. I had an off day, but I'll come back and I'll be ready to go if I'm called upon. And going 2/3 of an inning is a lonely feeling. I'm telling you, as a pitcher, it is something you want to just bury yourself behind the pitcher's mound and dig a hole and stick your head in it and just and not be seen. It is something, because you're, as a pitcher, you're out there, you're on your own island, and for whatever reason, Ole Miss were keying on his fastball, and his fastball was up, and the walks didn't help either. I mean, it was just a disastrous performance. You just got to hope he bounces back whatever role he has this coming week.
Okay, let me ask you a question, because I think the way that you stated that a minute ago is really framed the whole way I think about this now. Let's say that they get in a situation this weekend or next weekend where they lose one of those first two games. So now you're down to a spot where you're going into game 3 and you can't afford another loss or your season is over. Does that change how they approach it? In other words, if you're 2-0 and riding high, well, of course, if you're 2-0 to Super Regional, then you advance. But let's say that they lose one of the first two this weekend and lose one of the first two next weekend. Does that change how they process things with who they start? Because then it's kind of truth or dare. You've got to go with – you can talk about feelings and leadership and all you want, but your season's on the line. I wonder if that changes things in that case.
I think so. It would depend on matchups too you're going to get, but to me, I think that would probably fare into the decision as far as who to go with. And you know, we're not getting into. I mean, we've seen enough guys in the past. We've seen about worry about it. I'm not talking about this getting guys feeling hurt and worrying about it. I don't think this staff is at that point. I mean, you're trying to win a national championship, so. When I say that, I don't want to take that lightly and have people misunderstand that, you know, they're worried about this guy's feelings or what is he. I think this team is grounded enough. I think they have enough camaraderie amongst them that it's not going to destroy them. I think the ego level on this team's pretty low from what I gather and what I've heard. So if the boat is not rocked too much, I think if it's just rocked a little bit and you have a little switch between the 3 and the 4 guy, I don't think it's going to matter. I don't think it's going to happen this weekend to get out of the regional and see how that works. But like you said, I mean, you go on a 2-game bad tear, your season's over. And this team has won 20 plus games here recently and you talk about being on a tear is one of the hottest teams in the country. But all it takes is a 2 bad game experience and you're packing your stuff and you're going on the Cape Cod League and all the other leagues and guys are getting drafted and you're sitting there going, what just happened? So I don't want to misconstrue the fact that I think that, I mean, they're going to do what's best as far as, I think the order, he's just said before, there's difference. Switching 2 guys is one thing and changing the order. I think Tim's process has always been that if you send a message that if you start, let's just say Hickman Friday against Ohio State, you're sending a message to this team and you're sending a message to your opponent that you disrespect them. You're sending the message to the team that this game is, you think you got it won and you're changing things just because of the opponent. And he didn't even do that with David Price in his prime. And we saw what happened against that Austin Peay game. We've talked about that before moons ago. It seems like when that was a dogfight till the end, and it was a game that Vanderbilt was being pressed all the way to the last inning on that game.
Yeah, he's not going to change his number 1 in that regional opener ever. I mean, even if it's facing me and you.
Right, exactly.
Let's talk about the regional draw. Your thoughts on that and just the NCAA tournament, the selection committee on the whole, whatever thoughts you had on that as the pairings came out today.
Oh, man. Chris, I have a beef, and I'm not complaining, because I mean you got to win to get there. You got to win the regional. You got to win the super. But I just wish that Ray Tanner and was somebody from the selection committee. And I know it's an unwritten rule, maybe, and it's all about travel and budgets, and I think it's ridiculous. I'm going to get off my soapbox here.
No, stay on really it because I have thoughts to add to your soapbox.
I mean, it's just the fact that the argument that the NCAA is going to have and pundits would have is that, Ohio State's an RPI of 126, but you've got Fordham at 135, Stony Brook's 138. So that the argument doesn't hold up. You got Army at 150. You got UIC at 187, Southern's at 206, Florida A&M's RPI is 235. I mean, as they say down here in the South, that ain't right. It's just not right. And I think that if you're the number 2 seed, you should be playing the second worst 4 seed in your first game. And this is you look at the brackets better than I do, and you study it. This is the only region. This is the only regional that has 3 conference champions along with the host. Tell me if I'm wrong, but a tournament champion.
No, I was thinking about that today. I think you're right. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just a bunch of baloney. I think that the NCAA has got to get off their horse, and they have to make this thing legitimate as far as the way they do it, as far as seedings and bracketing and how they send people places. And we're also talking about an organization, and I know it has to be voted on, Chris, as far as the third assistant, and that's my second gripe, but that we're talking about an organization that does not recognize that you can have a paid third assistant when the basketball staffs have 6 and 7 and 8 paid guys. Those are my two beefs. And I think that, Omaha is going to have thousands and thousands of people going through their turnstiles in a couple weeks, and you're going to have the games on the major networks, the ESPN. You're going to have regionals and super regionals with incredible atmospheres, and that's all great. I don't have a problem at all with the super regional conference, first conference. And Ray Tanner, I will say this. He did express himself that, you know what, it is based on merit 1 through 16, and you can't help it if SEC teams are going to be playing SEC teams in the supers. I don't have a problem with that. What I do have a problem with is the fact that Vanderbilt is playing a conference tournament champion in the first round. Now, and there shouldn't be this gnashing of teeth, worried about it. Oh, my goodness. And I don't have it that they're going to lose. If they lose, they lose. But it shouldn't be that. It's not like that in any other sport. It's not like that in basketball. If Kentucky in their prime was, had to play a team like the equivalent of an Ohio State, I mean, someone who was had a great season and not playing Grambling or some Yale or some team in the play-in game, people would be going bananas. So it's just where we are in the game. The game is advanced in college baseball. It's come a long way. The TD Ameritrade Park is a great facility. Omaha does a great job on it. It just seems like it's just empty to me that they don't at least come out and admit it. Like, okay, this is a money thing. It's a travel thing. We don't want to spend any money. It's regionally based. We're going to put teams, if there's 4 Florida teams, we're going to put them in. Don't care what their RPI is. That's the way it's going to be. Just say it, but don't pretend that the numbers that I just read off to you, that this is the opponent Vanderbilt should be playing. Vanderbilt should beat Ohio State. They're better than them in every way. It shouldn't be a problem, but you should reward a team for having the season that Vanderbilt had, that they should be playing one of those lower level teams. So you go. I'm done.
Yeah. Do you have a few minutes? Because my soapbox might be bigger than yours.
Go ahead.
It's like, where do I start? And by the way, this is not a Vanderbilt thing. I watch every year, and just stuff drives me bananas about how they do this. Like, I think Mississippi State really got screwed, not just with the national seed, but with sending Miami, which Miami is probably one of the 2 or 3 best 2 seeds in the tournament. And, oh, by the way, they've had some pitching injuries that impacted them. Like, if they'd had everybody on deck, like the guys that they're going to have back for the tournament, they might have been a 1 seed. You send those to Starkville when Miami should have been, if Miami's healthy, they're probably hosting a regional chip, and they send them to Starkville. The State, in my mind, was the 3rd best team in the country this year. So that's one thing. I see them do this over and over, and every year I just look at 1 or 2 teams. I'm like, who in the world did they tick off on the committee to get that draw? And then I look at a couple teams like Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech got the easiest team in the field to open with, and then it got a 2 seed in Auburn. No disrespect to Auburn. I think Butch Thompson did a great job, but their main lineup hitters they counted on had bad years. Holland came through at the end, and you throw on top of that Davis Daniel, their best pitcher or their best reliever, is not available for the tournament, didn't pitch much this year. And then Tanner Burns was supposed to pitch in Hoover, never did. That, to me, I wonder if they know he's not available and we're saying that he's going to be available so that the NCAA wouldn't use it against him in seeding or in throwing them out of the tournament. So you got an Auburn team that really was a 2 based on RPI, and now without maybe its 2 best players going to Georgia Tech, which again gets the easiest opener. I'm like, what are you guys smoking? What are you thinking? It's like, here's what drives me crazy. They are so arbitrary and stuff. Like, they are so hell-bent on getting those 1 to 16, and we don't care if we match, SEC against SEC in the supers down the line. And I'm fine with that if that's based on merit. But where does merit play into regionals, man? Listen to these numbers. The way I see it, what you should do is you should seed 1 to 16 and start S-curving from there. And I get if you want to do geography and maybe give a 3 or 4 seed leeway. In other words, if you want to seed, say 15 is one of your host teams, and they should be playing the number 17 team on your S-curve. Well, let's say 17 is 2,000 miles away. If you want to have a leeway and maybe bring number 19 instead because they're 200 miles down the road, great. Have a little leeway with geography. But this just helter-skelter, just throw darts and put teams places, I don't get it because a lot of these teams in the Northeast, Chip, they're going to have to travel somewhere anyway, okay? And it's not like Ohio State is that close to Nashville. Ohio State's going to be driving several hundred miles anywhere it goes unless they sent them maybe to Louisville or to West Virginia. Those were the shortest distances, but you could have sent Fordham here. You could have sent Quinnipiac here, Central Connecticut, Army. It doesn't really matter to them if they're going to Nashville or to Texas Tech. Listen to the RPIs of some of these 4 seeds. Florida A&M, 239, Southern 204, Omaha 198, Illinois Chicago 189, Quinnipiac 179, Central Connecticut 183, Army 150. And you look at some other power rankings that aren't RPI based, and they're all saying basically the same thing. Now, some of these teams might be off 20 spots, so instead of 180, they might be 160, but they're still a lot better or a lot worse teams than the Ohio State team that Vanderbilt got. And I get the RPI is 122, but they just went through and won a conference tournament that had 5 teams that got bids in it, 4 besides Ohio State. So they've shown that they're good enough to win a tournament baseball, and B, they don't even look at Friday night starters, it seems like to me, because to me, there's a big difference between a team just on most days and a team when they've got their ace on the mound. You can have an RPI of 150, but like if you're Florida Gulf Coast and you got Chris Sale on the mound, I'm sure they were a 4 back when they were in the tournament. Some poor team got to face that. Well, that's not a 150 RPI team. That's a top 25 RPI team then. So not only do they give Vanderbilt when they could have easily, Aaron Fitt pointed this out at D1 Baseball. Of the 8 top seeds in the tournament, nobody got a 4 nearly as tough as that one. And on top of that, Ohio State's pitcher, this is who I would presume they were going to throw in the opener, Seth Lonsway, he's a freshman lefty. His last 3 starts, here's what they were. 21 1/3 innings pitched, 2 runs, 1 earned, 10 walks, 33 strikeouts, gave up 8 hits, and was the national pitcher of the week 2 weeks ago. Now, his numbers on the whole, the ERA is mid to high 3s. He had 4 rough appearances right out of the gate when he was getting used to college baseball. From that point on, he had an ERA well under 3. Not only did they give Vanderbilt needlessly one of the tougher 4 seeds, but they gave him one with the stud. And that is where this is inexcusable. People say, oh, the committee does a good job. Well, they got, we only differed on 1 or 2 teams. Well, let me tell you, I could sit there with a spreadsheet in a few hours and put this together. I got 63 of the 64 teams they had. It's not hard. And by the way, TCU gets in. Chris Del Conte's on the committee. One of his best friends is Jim Schlossnagle, who's the head coach at TCU. So
yeah, it's a joke.
Yeah, you tell me what's going on there. That they get so hung up on this parity thing and even balance, and that they stick to it to the letter of it, no matter what it does. They don't care about geography and the supers, and then they forget all that. They forget anything about parity when it comes to regionals. They forget, and then when they start things up on Friday, here's what it's going to be. They're going to be all worried about walk-up music and parody and, well, this team can't do this, and the PA announcer can't use a voice inflection because it might be an advantage. And Vanderbilt, you were in this dugout all year, but you got to go to the other one. It's like, where's that in the selection process? This drives me nuts. It's like, why are they so focused on these things that don't matter, and these things that do matter, they completely screw it up.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And I think, your idea as far as the seeding. I mean, I even heard some talk about just going 1-64. Just do like the basketball
that's
tournament.
what they should do. They should go 1-64. Give them a couple of teams leeway. If you want to, if the matchup as the numbers go, say this team has to travel a couple thousand miles, and you can switch it. Bump a team up a notch or two and bring a team that's 200 miles away. Fine. I have no problem with that because it's close, but this is ridiculous. I'm sorry for my rant, but it just, every year I see this. This is not a this year thing. This happens every year, Chip.
Yeah, and I don't know what it's going to take. I mean, you would think that, Ray Tanner, to his credit, I mean, he's an excellent baseball mind. He's been in South Carolina, met the man, been nothing but nice to me. Met him twice, 2 occasions, very personal. You would think a guy like that with his weight, being the head of the committee, could do that. But I think Aaron Fitt wrote a column also, it might be beyond him. I mean, he can only do so much. I mean, you're kind of given the figurehead title and he can go in there and talk. But until there's some serious legislation as far as fixing this thing the way it should be, it more people, the third assistant deal, there has been, and Cal Peterson has been tooting the horn, and you have the article by Tim Corbin and across the country, and it's been, the article that was done in the Tennessean, and it was front page of sports. I mean, things like that. I mean, there are some coaches who are angry about that didn't pass at the paid third assistant, and it's going to take something. It's going to take something like that, a groundswell of, hey, look, this is just not right. You don't do it for anything else. The NCAA's got plenty of money, Chris. They can fix this thing if they want. And it's not like, I mean, no offense to the other sports. These are just facts, right? I mean, no one's tuning in to the bowling and to the track and field. I've seen them on the SEC network. Those championships, they're like they are baseball. And instead of embracing it in a way that they could to fix it and make it be with more parity, you want to have the best, and it's easy for me to say this, played in the conference, have followed the conference. You want to have the best 8 teams in Omaha, Nebraska in June. And whatever that takes, that needs to happen. But I think there is not a bias is the word I'm looking for, but there is still an uneasy feeling that one day, if they didn't do it, you would see 5 teams from the SEC in Omaha, and to the NCAA, that would just be a disaster to them as far as when you're talking about baseball across the country as a whole. And what are you trying to do? You trying to get the best 8 teams in Omaha? Or are you trying to get parity, like you mentioned, and not hurt anybody's feelings, and make sure you get a cold weather team up there? And definitely got to get a team from the West out there, regardless if they're one of the better teams. So having said all that, I will say that the game is played on the field, and you got to get there. And I don't think that Tim Corbin will let this get to him. I don't know if he was surprised. He's seen enough. He's been on enough committees. He's seen enough in his time of coaching in the Southeastern Conference to know that the game's won on the field. You gotta win it there, and you advance, and not worry about the future. But we can sit here and talk about it, and we want to. We don't work for the NCAA. We don't work for Vanderbilt. We can sit there and say that it's just not right. It needs to be fixed. Whether it does or not gets fixed, it's another thing, though.
Well, and I don't mean to target Ray Tanner. I have a lot of respect for Ray. He, of course, has been through this as a coach. I think he's probably got some good ideas. I just think the NCAA from top to bottom is a flawed organization. What I would do, and you have several days to do this. It's not that hard. You could put stuff in front of you. I would hire a couple of interns, heck, hire more than a couple. Have them go through stuff and try to catch things like who's got an ace, and okay, if we're gonna pair this, okay, whose team, what team here is okay? They're an RPI 130, but when they got this guy on the mound, he's dominant. Nobody hits him, because to me, that's not an RPI 130 anymore. That's a top 50 RPI team. I mean, you should be able to catch these things with some research. If I'm catching them, and you got a committee of a couple dozen people that's not, there's something wrong with that.
Well, we've mentioned this before in years past, but if you're talking about 2 games, and this is just the way this tournament's played, you're talking about Vanderbilt and Ohio State, okay? in a 7-game series, Vanderbilt's going to win that series because the depth of pitching, Vanderbilt's pitching's better. The hittings would just overwhelm. It would just be a situation. Eventually, it would catch up to Ohio State. But when you're talking about a 1-game shot, which it's not, it's double elimination tournament, but a situation where it's 1 versus 4 and you got an ace. I've said this before and I'll say it again. You're going to see, and you see it every year. You saw it with Stony Brook when they crawled into the Baton Rouge Regional a couple years ago and made it to Omaha. Every team in this tournament, not every single one, but most of the teams have a stud on the mound or they wouldn't have gotten there. So that's why you see a lot of 1 versus 4 games that are close. And if the two teams end up playing 2 days later on Sunday in the kind of the championship, the other team battles their way back. A lot of times it's 20-0 or 18-2. They're blowouts because their 3 and 4 guys would be on an SEC staff, the 7, 8, and 9 guys. It's just a depth issue. So you're exactly right when that is extremely truthful and a great statement you said that a team with, for example, Navy. I don't know what Navy. Did Navy make the field?
No, Army beat them in the Patriot League.
Oh, really?
Some team somewhere is very happy that it got Army instead of Navy because of the pitching situation. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they've got that stud on the mound that leads the country in strikeouts. But like you mentioned, the RPIs vary differently from that first game when you've got the stud, and then they get back more towards neutral and where they really are in games 2, 3, and 4 of the tournament.
Yeah, and again, it's not just do you win or lose the game. I think back in 2007, Austin Peay knocked Vanderbilt out of the regional as much as Michigan did because Vanderbilt had to go to extra innings. It burned Casey Weathers, and it did not have him in a key situation the next night. He was far and away their best bullpen arm, and Michigan beats them in that second game in the regional, set the tone for the rest of the weekend. They just didn't have all the bullets to come back while Michigan got more rest. That's why it matters. It's not just the wins or losses. And I get that people say, well, you should just win the tournament, period, not you just play the games in front of you and just beat who you got to beat. And if you can't beat Ohio State anyway, then you probably don't deserve to be a national champ. That's not the point. The point is, if we're going to emphasize being fair, let's just not arbitrarily, throw a team like that in the 2 national seed and you just throw somebody else who's not nearly the team that is. And again, this is not a Vanderbilt thing. This happens to multiple teams across the country every year. It's about the process of being fair, and I think we've exhausted that by now. But anyway, any other thoughts on the regional or anything else with the team maybe in Hoover last week that's worth covering that we haven't covered tonight?
No, I think it was just what a difference the game Sunday in the turnaround makes. As we talked about, it was, overall, you look back on it now, you win an SEC regular season championship, you win 4 games down in Hoover, you win SEC tournament champions. And everybody's got to feel good about them, and you're getting to host, and you get a chance to host the super regional if you make it through. The other 2 teams that we haven't talked about in this regional with Indiana State and McNeese. I mean, those I know nothing about. I know Indiana State. I went to that game earlier. They got a good ball club. They won 41 games, and I'm sure you know a little bit more about McNeese. But how do you see that going? I'll ask you as far as the other opponents, because I know we're sitting here talking about Ohio State, and again, 3, and I'll emphasize it again, in this regional, 4 conference champions coming here to Nashville, which is a little bit unusual for the 2 seed. What do you think about those other 2 teams?
Well, I don't know a ton about them. We saw Indiana State, or I didn't see them, but they played at Hawkins Field in the midweek game, and Vanderbilt broke that one open, I think, in the mid-innings. But that's a really good team. I have no gripe with their 2 seed. A 2 seed's always going to be tough for the most part. I think they got a middle-of-the-road 2 seed. Here's a caution, though. Indiana State had 3 starters who all had sub-3 ERAs, who started 14, 15, and 15 games. The worst one of them, Tyler Whitbread, pitched 78 in the third, had an ERA of 2.99. So they got 3 solid starters. That's the kind of team that you don't want to face in a regional a lot of times. Their bullpen, they had 2 arms behind them, Tyler Ward, Jake Ridgway, threw a lot of innings for them. One of them threw 53 in the third, one of them threw 40. From there, it really dropped off. So they're going to bank on their starters to go deep into games. Offensively, they were okay. Pitching-wise, they're not an overpowering staff, but they don't put a lot of guys on base either. They only walked 178 guys all year. So that's something to watch. McNeese State was probably – and this is what the NCAA does. when they look to get balance in a draw, a lot of times they will do that with the third seed. Vanderbilt probably got one of the weakest 2 or 3 seeds in the field in McNeese State. But a lot of times you don't even see the 3 in your regional if you're the host. So I think I don't know how much it matters. McNeese State, another team that got some stuff done pitching-wise. I don't know much about them. I know the Southland's a pretty decent baseball conference. Sam Houston State was a team in that league that led it most of the year and couldn't come through in postseason. Let's see. I don't know that they've got a real stud starter, though. So there's that. Well, they had their main guy had a 2.97 ERA. They had some solid guys, but maybe not a shutdown guy. Just from looking at it on the stat sheet.
Well, let me ask you this question: would you have been shocked if they had flipped the 3 and 4 seeds and had Ohio State the 3 and McNeese the 4? To me, that seemed more of a logical thing there. Even though you're taking Ohio State's come from Power 5 conference, they won the conference tournament and won 5 games to do so. It just seemed to me that you look at McNeese's numbers in the RPI, that would have been a more logical move there by the NCAA. But what's logical,
Well, McNeese had a better RPI. That might have helped a little bit, but it still doesn't solve the problem. To me, if you're one of the top few ones, you should get – and there's more discrepancy in the 4 seeds than there is any other seeding category. Florida A&M is horrible. Was 27-32, got an RPI 239, power ranking. There's a composite out there. They were 244, 299 teams. That's the kind of team. If you're going to be rewarded with the 1 seed, what you need to do is you need to get a week 4 and then figure it out with the 2s and 3s. Don't stick a Miami at Mississippi State. I still don't think that would have solved the issue. Would it have helped a little bit? Maybe, because they don't have a stud. But to me, there's just no excuse not to give a team like UCLA or Vanderbilt one of the worst 3 or 4 teams in the field.
Yeah, and what are you rewarding? You hear it all the time. The SEC basically several years ago, 2 years ago, was it, that they made the decision in basketball, we need to start playing people. We need to get our RPI up. We need to get our conference identity back the way it used to be. So you had teams going out there and scheduling, going on the road, traveling. Well, look at what Tim Corbin does. He goes to either California, he goes to Texas. He gets the RPI up and strength of schedule is way up. He does everything you are really supposed to do, and then you get rewarded. You're supposed to get rewarded to do that if you play well. And if the conference is you're playing every week and every weekend's a battle, you're fighting like crazy to survive that, and then you go to a conference tournament that's like a mini Omaha, and then you come home and you get rewarded. There's no reward. I guess your reward is you get to host, and if you're a national seed and you get to play your way to Omaha at home. But still, it just doesn't make logical sense to not get the full benefit of doing everything you're supposed to be doing, playing a tough schedule, playing well in your conference, going on the road, not staying at home like LSU has done for years and played their first 28 games or 21 games at home. Vanderbilt doesn't do that. They go to LA, they go to Houston, they go to Arizona, they play quality teams, and that to me is the injustice of it.
Well, it's the picking and choosing, the arbitrary. So it's focusing on parity with stuff like walk-up music, and completely missing this. And again, that's why I point to. I think it's a culture issue, and I'll give them credit. At least they don't do that with the supers anymore. At least they get it better in that case where they do seed them according to parity. I don't really have a problem with it. I just don't understand why there's so much flexibility on the regional end and then there's none on the super end. But I liken it to this. I think I've given this example on the podcast before. I used to live in a condo, and there was a little bathroom, and it kind of was sectioned off. You had a room for the toilet and the shower, and then you had a room for the vanity. And there was this ledge that came down over these track lighting that we had. And for years, I stepped out of that bathroom every day, and I never noticed this. But I looked up one day, and I was like, that beam's not even. And sure enough, I got out the tape measure, and one end was 13 inches from wall, and the other one was 15. And the contractor who built the house never caught it. I didn't catch it for years. The NCAA's got this crooked beam in front of them every day, but because they're so used to seeing it, they don't have the eyes to see it. And I think this is another place where it's folly with them.
I agree. Yeah, it's just and until there's enough cane raised about it, they're not going to do anything about it. Hopefully, some things will get switched on the baseball side because it's too good of a sport, and it's got too much momentum. I think ESPN's caught on to it with the round, the bases loaded package, and you're going to see a lot of just wall-to-wall baseball coverage. But still, there's some things they can adjust as far as some legislation and the way the seedings are going to the tournament that could be better.
Well, all the bones to pick with the decide. I can't wait for baseball. I love nothing more than just sitting down in front of the TV from the moment they have the first pitch in Starkville or wherever it is and just watching whoever, because you see players and you learn things. And the strategy element of this with the pitching and stuff is just, to me, is fascinating with how it develops over the weekend.
Oh, yeah. And there's you're seeing some future major leaguers here, and the tomorrow stars of the Major League Baseball are going to be right on stage, and you can see some great atmospheres. I mean, you're going to see Oxford, you're going to see Starkville, you're going to see here in Nashville. You got your West Coast going on at UCLA and the Stanford. I mean, there's definitely baseball powerhouses, stadiums that know how to do it and put on good shows. So for the positive part of that, we're going to see some great venues. I know I had the chance to do a regional several years ago in Columbia, and when South Carolina was rolling, and that was a lot of fun. I mean, it's just the places that know how to do it. And then, you got some areas, West Virginias of the world who've never done it. So it's always good to have one or two of those to see how a new team that's on the scene and how they handle it. And because it is a different beast, and you got to be able to, if you're a team, you got to be able to stay even keel and not get too caught up in the moment. And it's fun also to see how those teams, and then you've got that Cinderella story like you had with Stony Brook a couple years ago. There'll be one of those, I'm sure, one or two. Every year there's one or two that kind of slip through, and it's fun to watch that too. So all in all, it's a lot to look forward to this week. A lot of fun baseball, and especially here at the Hawk.
Well, the good news as we come to the end of the podcast is I know one organization that does not screw things up, and I think you do too.
Yeah, Chris, just talk a little bit about our real estate company, Fridrich and Clark Realty. We liken our agents to having, we have 150 closers and on our staff. We have two offices, one in Brentwood and one in Green Hills. And when I say closers, you can have your aunt or your uncle, have their real estate license and sell you a house. And that's all great. And there's some people out there who get their real estate license just for that. Well, at our agency at Fridrich and Clark, we do not emphasize that. We have all our agents are full-time. It's what they do for a living. So give us a call. Check us out on the web at frederickandclark.com. You can call our office and talk to me personally at the Green Hills office at 615-327-4800. If you're in the market to buy or to sell your home, we can give you all the data and the analytics as far as what your house is worth for today. I know that I live in the Forest Hills area of Nashville, and there are a lot of houses that are being converted and tear downs. People are buying these houses, tearing them down, using them for the dirt and building new houses. And we've seen in the last just 10 days an enormous amount of increase as far as prices just on that. We're talking $750,000 for a tear down, and people are raising it and building a house. So a lot of those things are going on in Nashville because the old adage is the good Lord didn't make any more dirt than exists now. So what's here is here, and a lot of that dirt is being gobbled up by people and building houses. So if you are in the mode for any of your real estate needs for buying or selling, give me a call. We're Vanderbilt people. We've got Vanderbilt leaders of our firm. We've graduates and former athletes. So love to sit down and talk with any of the listeners here about their real estate needs. And again, check us out on the web at frederickandclark.com.
Chip, that was a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to the one we'll do this time next week. There will be a lot to talk about one way or the other.
Hopefully so. Hopefully it'll be good news like it's been. You can't really complain about the last couple of weeks. So hopefully keep this train moving, and got to take them one at a time, one tournament at a time. And hopefully this time next week we'll be talking about a super regional.
He's Chip Fridrich. I'm Chris Lee, the host of the Vandy Sports Podcast. Thanks for listening. We've got several more of these coming later in the week.